So what that is saying is Adino the Etzny, the top guy of the top three of David's mighty men, is compared to David in battle.
Okay.
That's heavy, right? Before
Yes.
we get it, yeah, before we get into all these crazy giants, they're off the bat comparing David and Adino the Etzny, and Etz is tree in Hebrew. So it's Adino the tree, tall as a tree, tall as a tree, compared to David in battle.
The Codega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his Codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours. Welcome back to Codega's Codex of Curiosities, the place where ancient texts whisper long forgotten truths and even familiar stories turn out to be stranger than fiction. Today, I'm welcoming back Adam Farris, a biblical researcher, graphic novelist, and returning guest whose debut on the show rocked the timeline. You remember the last time we tackled the Nephilim, David and Goliath, and possible real world location of the Tower of Babel. Mind blowing, doesn't even begin to cover this. Okay, so Adam is back, and we are marching straight into the mysterious ranks of David's mighty men. These weren't your average warriors, described in scripture with almost mythic feats, killing hundreds in single encounters, wielding spears like storm gods. One has to ask, were these men purely human, or were they something else? In this episode, we'll explore the explosive possibility that David's elite warriors weren't just brave, they might have been giants, chimera like hybrids, or even divinely altered beings, remnants of bloodlines long thought extinct. Could these legendary fighters have had roots in some dark recess of history as the Nephilim? Could the mighty men represent a supernatural resistance to supernatural evil? Now, as Adam brings his meticulous research and unique lens to the table, guys, I want you to expect stories of supernatural feats, hidden lineages, and the spiritual war that might still echo in our world today. Okay, so everyone, I want to do a quick little shout out. I got some of my hats that I have on the merch store, so I want you to check it out. I have the lantern emblem, and just like this. So if you guys are into some cool hats, some cool merch, you can help support the show. I'm not looking for donations. I want to sell you guys some really cool merch, and that will help support the show. I have a large bill coming up soon for my streaming service, and it would greatly help. So look at some of the merch in the merch store. You'll find the links down below. Called fourth. It's in the fourth wall. It's called Codega's Bodega. I like it. I like it. So there. Now, also, if you're enjoying the show, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. If you're listening to the audio, leave me a review. It really, really helps. It helps to get the word out of the show. And I've been having a huge success of increase of new listeners. So welcome aboard, everyone, and I hope you guys enjoy this one. So strap in, Codega fam. The battlefield is ancient, but the truth is timeless. Time to bring Adam to the show. Adam, welcome back to Codega's Codex of Curiosities.
Hey, buddy, appreciate you having me back, man.
Yeah, always, always. You message me. You're like, dude, we got to do this. David and the Mighty Man, and of course, I'm on board. You know, I'm not. I don't want to give away too much, but you kind of give me a bit of a teaser of what type of beings were in his group, and I'm like, okay, this sounds like some sort of Dungeons and Dragons exploration group of some of these beings, and I don't want to even say creatures, we'll just say beings. But it sounds super interesting. So for those who don't know you, Adam, if they haven't listened to the previous episode, which was Goliath and the Nephilim, I'd love for you to give us a little brief introduction and tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, writer, biblical researcher, Instagram, Adam Farris, and on YouTube, Adam Farris. In a nutshell, I, excuse me, I was led to write a David and Goliath graphic novel, and that really sent me down the Gibberim wormhole, and kind of woke me up to the Bible is really not what we understand it to be, at least the history part of it. um, and it really goes back to Gen 6, which obviously we're going to get into with all the craziness. But yeah, dude, I appreciate you having me back on and being able to talk about this craziness, man.
I I agree. Yeah, Gen 6, I had on Gary Wayne, who really dives deep into Gen 6, the Genesis 6 conspiracy. And that was kind of one of my eye openers. I'm like, wow, this is just so much more. And and we talked about this off air where, a lot of people get turned off when they hear Bible. They think, oh, it's religious texts. And it's like, no, this is one of the greatest history books ever written. And, these aren't parables or allegories, that are in there. They're real accounts of actual events. And I think we have to start treating it that way and start diving into these and start realizing that there's so much more to our history than we're being told. We didn't just some caveman and just slowly adapted, and that's it. We went from sticks and rocks to fire to swords to guns and whatnot. There was something in between that's being left out, and let's leave it up to you here to tell us about this legion. This, I don't want to say legion because that kind of has another negative connotation, but this group of mighty men and David. Let's start with David, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, man. For me, just before this all happened, Gen 6, just it didn't make sense that that was just a couple of lines, because that's a very heavy thing. um you know for the two people out there that haven't heard of that, is basically the sons of God, the angels rebelled, came down, took wives, and then humanity was different ever since. And it, again, it doesn't make sense that something so heavy could be four lines in a book, and that's that. And then the only way that you can get access to that is other books, right? Enoch, and all this and this and this and this. Not knocking those books, but that just doesn't make sense. So going on my journey and finding these things, I started with David and Goliath. That was my lane, and I studied that ridiculously. And it you know um again, not to go back in the five stones, but the five stones were there because the giants were there. But then certain parts of David's mighty men actually are the ones that killed the Goliath's three sons and brother. So you start looking at it, and like the story of David, from killing Goliath until him dying, basically he accrued, running from Saul and then running from his two sons. He accrued all of these the this garrison of Gibberim, and it's broke down in different ways, which will go in, and it makes it a lot easier because the 37 mighty men is just the tip of the iceberg, basically. So something really cool too. It's Second Samuel is 23 is the first David's mighty men list, and then First Chronicles is the same list, and then more of a garrison. So I found some stuff that's really cool that defined like some actual human elements in the Bible, where the chronicler was copying notes about David and his triumphs, and he made some mistakes and some interesting stuff. Yes, it's really wild. Just see some human elements in there. Of the mighty men, there was a couple misspellings, and then it looks like one person died, and then like a brother in arms joined them. But the biggest one I really like is the top three, and I'll explain this, and then I'll start breaking down David's counsel and all that stuff. But it's really cool. So the top three, it says these are the names of David's Gibberim, who he had. And then in Hebrew, it's Yoshev, Bashavet, Tachemine, the same as Adino the Etzni. So in First Chronicles, the gentleman, the chronicler, kind of read that a little wrong and put it as Jasherbeth the Tachemite, because I mean, when you read the Bible, the boring stuff is Adam the blah, Adam, these crazy names, and you have no reference for them. So what it actually is Yosef with a capital Y means to dwell. Like when you the Hebrew language is descriptive. So when you sit in a seat, you're inhabiting that chair, right? You're dwelling in that chair. But if you are a lowercase y, would be like sitting at the right hand of God, stuff like that. But then the King James translation says, "He who sits at the seat of the Tachemon." So it's translating Yishov and Bashavet as dwelling in the seat. So it's these are the names of the Gibberim whom David had, semicolon, who sits at this who dwellings in the seat of wisdom, the same as Adino the Etzni. So what that is saying is Adino the Etzni, the top guy of the top three of David's mighty men, is compared to David in battle. That's heavy, right? Before we get in, yeah, before we get into all these crazy giants, they're off the bat comparing David and Adino the Etzni, and Etz is tree in Hebrew. So it's Adino the tree, tall, tall as a tree, tall as a tree, compared to David in battle. So this reputation this guy's got. But that's the top three, and we'll get to those in a second. So David's counsel. Now, when he first kills Goliath, he wins favor in Saul. Saul gives him command of a 1,000-man army. David immediately starts kicking nasty butt, and Saul can't handle it. Super jealous, and then that's how the story kicks off. So he when he gets that 1,000-man army, I feel like he started his garrison there, and that's his initial David's counsel, which was one of the sons of Zariah. So if this gets really crazy and nerdy and complicated, stop me and join, because it's just crazy names. But so David's sister, and we touched base on this on the last show, so I'll make it quick. But David's sister Zariah, it's more Nephilim bloodline. The father's not mentioned of the three boys that she has, and her sister is that father is mentioned, and then Joab it's mentioned that he is crossed over by Amasa because he is the son of a man. So it's established that Zariah, that line, is Nephilim bloodline. And Joab is over the host of Israel, so he's David's head guard, and that's when he crews him. Then when he has that 1,000-man army, the next is Benaiah. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, chivalrous man from Kabzel. Now, we know Benaiah as killing 2 lion-like men of Moab. That's his feat of strength in the Bible. Is why he's one of David's Gibberim, and that's one of the first times that the lion-like men of Moab are mentioned. So it starts to get a little crazy right there, and that's just his initial counsel.
The Lion Man, yeah, that is something that I find really fascinating.
Yeah, which is the Lot, Sodom bloodline, the Moabites. But Benaiah was in charge of the Cherethites and the Pelethites, which are David's initial bodyguards. And they are known in the Bible as deadly mercenaries. And I went down a bunch of rabbit holes with them. So the Cherethites are from Crete, they're Cretans. And then the Pelethites are the Peleset people in Egypt. So they're a track form of the Philistines too. So that's his deadly mercenary. So he's accruing these wild people. And now he has a gentleman named Adoram. His name it's spelled 3 different ways: Adoram, Hadoram, and Adorium. So it seems like it might be a title or a nickname or something. but he is over David's forced labor. So in the story of David, as he's going through, he's doing raid parties, he's giving people a chance, to join, or or whatever. Now, Adoram, his name translated, or that name is Lord of Height, and he is over the forced labor. Now, what was going down, and I touched base, we talked about it too on the show in Five Stones, was giants. We weren't scared of giants at this point. Like, that's malarkey from some other book. Like, giants were an absolute part of society, ridiculous part of, it wasn't even like a thing to see them. There's thousands of them. David had 600 Gittites, where Goliath was a Gittite. So yeah, so when they would conquer, that would become their forced labor. Solomon had forced labor as well, and Solomon had 70,000 stone carriers in his. Yeah, dude, there's giants everywhere, man. So, and that's, so then he has a scribe named Shiva, and he has two priests. Now, the crazy part about the priests is they're in scripture carrying the ark themselves. It was two different guys. And if you research the ark, it takes a group of people and something to carry it with. Like, it's a monumentally, like, a big, heavy thing. David's personal priests, the Kohanim, were able to carry it. It was just them two carrying it by themselves, probably.
Probably two giants as well, then, most likely, right?
Yeah. So basically, like his initial, and there's a couple more people, but there's his initial people, and then it just got bigger and bigger and worse and worse as his flanks went. So he had the final gentleman in David's council was Ira, also the Yerite. Now, Yeri translated as forced, so it's Ira the Forced, and he was chief ruler, or Conum. So it was a form of Levitical, but it wasn't a priest, but it was kind of like just to oversee kind of thing. So that's his initial council. Couple giants, couple really, really nasty dudes.
Yes.
Right.
like
So
like, it's funny that I mentioned a D&D Dungeons and Dragons party. Yeah, we got we got our assassins. We got our rogues. We got our giants. We got our. This is kind of similar to that. It's so out there, but this is what really is being said. This is in the Bible. This isn't like some sort of fabricated story. This is legit.
well, see, that's it. And the story goes, it's spiritual warfare. So Gen 6, that's what happened. That's when the human genealogy changed. And then the flood, and then Ham, and then it came back. But it was in our blood. So if you track everything from Ham on, it's all intermarriage. Like, a bunch of the actual giants, the actual mighty men, are come from the tribe of Benjamin. And Benjamin, they weren't, because the 12 tribes of Israel, Benjamin wasn't the best, and they did a lot of intermarrying, and they, you know, made a lot of mistakes. And that's where a lot of these came from. And then, of course, Gad too, and we're going to get into the Gad, some more lion-like men. But it's literally, once it was in the bloodline, it just kept going, and that's why God was specific about intermarriage with these tribes, because he's essentially trying to stop this stuff, stop the craziness of the bloodlines. But it kept going. So Gen 6 again, it puts Gibberim, giants, on the map. And we look at non-biblical maps, man, and like how many giants in the 1500s and 1600s are documented, and then all of a sudden they stop. They're just, oh, that's myth, that's just craziness.
Just disappeared. I have a question. Adam. Now,
Mhm.
I think in the beginning I was confusing giants and Nephilim, but are they two in different things, or do you think they intermingle somehow? Is there some connections between those two, or is it there was an actual, like, instead of, like, we had the human beings, and then they even said that there was like the hobbits as well, like there were hobbit type people were much shorter. Is there giant people that aren't of the Nephilim, but just that this is almost a whole other race of people?
Mhm. Yep, exactly. So the way I take it is, it, Nephilim were giants. That's kind of how that went because it's angelic conception. Um, but through intermarriage, like that's where you get the line like men of Moab. So I believe that there's scriptural evidence that once it's there, depending on who and where you intermarry, it could change and go in different directions. Like literally, I keep saying lion like men of Moab. That's where that comes from. But then his brother Ammon was not a giant and wasn't lion like. So he just wasn't completely human. Same with the Malachites and Esau and Edom. Was once it's there, it can kind of go in different directions. Predominantly, it is scripturally backed with height. You see that quite a bit, and I think. Go ahead.
So I find a lot of things like in Hollywood or whatnot, like telling of what the truth really is, and we talk about mutants, like a mutant gene, and something happens and then they turn into something else. It seems very similar to something along that line, that these are like I don't want to say the X-Men, but these are like mutants that you're finding in the Marvel's universe kind of thing. Like
Mhm.
they are mutants, and sometimes that gene activates, sometimes it doesn't, and they don't have this ability or anything like that.
Yeah, like a crazy thing that I found was, and we even talked about this in text. So David had some Netophaниtes that are known as singers, but they're Gibberim. Yeah, and then sons of Korah as well were part of the Dirty 30, which we're going to get into, where they actually wrote psalms and they were battle psalms, and they even in Psalm 45:3 says, uh, um, "Gird your sword, O Gibor." So it's like it's just like we don't. The history of this thing is just is we're just scratching the surface, man. It was like, can you imagine that not only are the Gibberim mighty men, vicious battle, they wrote some songs, like literally.
And there's me bringing up Dungeons and Dragons again. That's the bard. We have the bard that can infuse his the mighty men with these songs and empower them. Maybe that's along that line. It's funny that I brought that up, but I feel that it's hitting more closer to home than I believe. All right,
Yeah.
so keep going, Adam. Sorry for the interruptions.
Yes. No, you're good. So really quick, we'll just do some highlights now. Ishbinabab was one of the Goliath's sons, and Ibiashi, one of the sons of Zariah, Joab's brother, is the one that killed him. So that's really wild, dude. The sons of Zariah, just craziness. It was Joab, Abiashi, and Ashale. Ashale, he had super speed, and
Yeah. Wow.
you can kind of
Okay.
read between the lines that he didn't have, like, he wasn't super strong and big because he was chasing down a chariot and then died. So but then Joab is able to conquer Jebus himself, the land of Jebusites, and you know what I mean. So there's some context there, but um Sibiachai the Hushite slew Soph, the other son of Goliath, and Elihanan, son of I ain't even gonna be able to say that. Elihanan, Behethelite, slew David Goliath's brother, and then the last one was Jonathan, one of David's brothers, killed the six-fingered on every hand, six-toed on every foot son of Goliath. So
and and and
basically,
the, and for those who don't know, six fingers is like a telltale sign of the Nephilim. It's huge. Six fingers is huge.
I'm telling you, dude, I keep beating a dead horse. Like, this story is so wild. We don't even have to go to non-canonical books to find Nephilim, and it's just it makes me feel good as a researcher that there's so much more evidence of this than it's just this. I think it's four lines, it's some wild stuff. Like, no, like it changed humans.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
So basically David kills Goliath. His three sons and brother are there, and then all his people gang up and take care of the rest of them because they're just bad and they needed to go. So that's David's counsel, and then some highlights. And now the Dirty 30. So on, I like that title.
The
Um,
dirty. I do too. I do too.
so when David was in his route of accruing all these people, he went to Gath, wasn't there long, went to Moab, and then went back to Gath, and he got to be real friends with the king of Gath there, and he was given the town of Ziklag, and Ziklag is a pre-promised land conquest land with a whole bunch of nasties, Edomites, Amalekites, and all that stuff. So while he's there, a bunch of dudes join up with him, and it's 30 guys. So, right off the bat, we think of 37. He had way more than 37. This is 67, then plus his council. Excuse me. And then later on, all these guys were over 24,000 each. It was a phenomenally large army. But so specifically, he had 11 Gadite warriors that all had the faces of lions, and they were swift as roes.
There we go. There we go. This is a lot of people misconstrued what that meant. They thought that, oh, these were like they fought like lions, right? And they were like like a lion. But no, what you're saying is no, that they were half lion.
Yes, they were absolutely. So that's twice that lion-like men have popped up, and we have to take it the full on. This was again, genealogy. It came in, and then intermarriage, then blood. It happens. So 11 of those guys joined up with him. He had some people from Gibeah, and to give you an idea of who was in Gibeah and Gibeonites, and I found something really wild. We're gonna talk about in a second. But the children of Belial are mentioned coming from Gibeah. Now, 2 Samuel 23:6 says that, but the sons of Belial shall be at all of them as thorns thrust away, because they cannot be taken with hands. But the man that shall touch them must be fenced with iron and the staff of a spear, and they shall be utterly burned with fire in the same place. Now, children of Belial is also in the Dead Sea Scrolls, mentioned as a demon, and Belial is also in the secret. It's not the secret. The Book of John, same thing. So it's like in Gibeah, really really bad craziness, but some good people joined from him, and then the Heraphites are more giants. Heraph means to pluck or to taunt, meaning, kind of just going through and grabbing some stuff. We mentioned the Korites, which were the singers in the Psalms. So these were some really, and then Nehemiah mentions Netophaonites three times. Two times as supplying singers, and third time as the land of singers. So, like we talked about in the text, can you imagine at the battlefront hearing this thunderous chanting? But
Deafening
so
and frightening all at the same time, and you have like this huge army coming in, and just like this thunderous singing. That's what I would imagine.
dude, and I mean, oh my gosh, and the reputation of David for all these monumental people to, anyways. So Ismaiah the Gibeonite in the Dirty 30. It's because there's a crazy competition. I mentioned it earlier with the Adino and all that word salad I spit out at the beginning. But there's a competition in the Mighty Men of who is the toughest of the tough and who you can compare to. So Ismaiah is a Gibeonite, but it says a mighty man among the 30 and over the 30. So he was the toughest of that 30 garrison, bar none. but he did not like place in the 37. But here's some really crazy stuff about the Gibeonites, man. Um, the Gibeonites are remnants of Amorites. The Amorites we talked about on the last show in Amos 2:9 are the size of cedar trees. And which is really wild to be able to boil this down where Amorites were bad. Well, they were good. I guess they were neutral at first, but then they got bad. And then they had to be taken out. But the Gibeonites are a remnant of Amorites. And they were never they weren't bad. Saul tried to kill them, and then there was a plague on the land because of that, and they tried to trick David at one point because they were just kind of scared. But not trick David, trick Israel. So they in Joshua in Joshua 9, they yeah, in Joshua 9 they tried to trick Israel and they got a punishment on them. And Joshua appointed them, you know, you can live with us, but forever cursed. You will be woodcutters and water carriers for the temple. Now these are giants, and they're appointed as woodcutters and water carriers. And we know in the Bible that the trees of cedar, cedars of Lebanon, are super sought after, and they even have to appoint special people to cut them and to raft them down to wherever they're going. So, like, you appoint this specific tribe of giants to be lifelong servants of the temple, to be woodcutters and water carriers. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of Solomon's molten sea.
No, no, I have not.
Yo. So Solomon, dude, is like a crazy Nephilim story behind the scenes because he's like making all these wildly big things. He makes a molten sea, and the description is like a
And when you say
big.
like, okay, molten sea, like a sea of molten rock.
It's made of bronze, and I guess that's why it's called molten. And it looks like a cup, like a goblet, kind of. Um, but it's made of bronze, and its height was 5 cubits. And we talked before about the whole cubits thing, if it's 12 inches or if it's 18 inches. So it's going to be 10 plus feet tall. This cup, modestly, it could be monumentally larger. Now, how does one fill a cup that large? I mean, this could hold tens of thousands of gallons. How does one fill this 10-foot tall with the Gibeonites?
Yeah, I was about to
The
say with
Gibeon
the giants. Yes.
Yes, the Gibeonites are noted as being the ones that were initially filling Solomon's molten sea. And and then back to David, one of those
Now,
was of
sorry,
his
sorry.
30.
I
Mhm.
want to go back to this molten sea. What exactly? So it was this big chalice,
Mhm.
this big goblet. But what was it? Does it say anything? What it was used for, or what
Yes.
was the purpose?
It was so before baptism, it was ceremonial cleansing. So the way it was the initial layer, humans could walk up to a priest, basically, could go up and get the water, and they could do whatever they needed to do with that initial layer. And the description goes, it's like this big goblet chalice kind of thing, and that's what overflows into that. And Solomon, the way I take it was Solomon was, he was noted as wisdom, right? Like that was his thing, is he was noted as wisdom. He asked God for wisdom. So then you look at everything that he made. I feel like that you can take from that he knew his resources. And that's my old work lingo was basically like, what do we have to work with, and what can we do? And if you got a bunch of giants, well, I can make some big and I can do some crazy stuff. You know what I mean? So like you read all these it's like how would he come up with how could that be possible without that? So yeah, basically, so that was the Molten Sea, was just big thing, and then the Gibeonites, you know, transcribed labor as the water carriers for the temple. Now, all right, so that was the Gibeonites, and that was the Dirty 30. So you had the 30, he had David's council, and then he had the Dirty 30 that joined in with them. And then the top three. So the top three is some pretty bad dudes. Now,
I would
um,
assume so.
so what's crazy is Abiyashi, one of the sons of Zariah, he is noted as being so tough that he was chief of the top three. He didn't have a name of the top three, and same with Benaiah. So both of them were like almost as tough as, and the feats that they took care of, but didn't quite place with these top three. And then, like, remember earlier, David and Adino were like comparative to, to toughness, basically. So the top three are you've got Adino the Etsny, we just discussed, was tall as a tree people. Then you've got Eleazar, the son of Dodai the Achochi. Now he Achochi broke down. Oh, a Hoite is Howling Beast. Howling Beast, Brotherly Howl, something, in that lines. And these are guys that took on 800, 300, by themselves. And then you've got Shemama, son of Ag, the Herite. Herite broke down is mountainous, mountain dweller. So you've got, realistically, of the top three, you've got two monumental giants and then one beastly person. Holding it down, dude. Yes. So, and then from there, man, um, it's 37 people. That's the tough part for me of because I've been doing the videos too on just bringing this knowledge to everybody, and I'm trying to figure out, we talked about doing AI and doing stuff like that. It's like the best way to give reference and character to these guys. But it's the rest going from there. It's a bunch of more giants. There's one dude, Hiddai, from the Brooks of Gash. Hiddai broke down as like snake charmer. So so yeah, dude. Lots and
Very
lots of
interesting. Now,
craziness.
okay, so we got this group of these mighty men. What what are they doing? What are they out there doing? What is the purpose of David's mission? What is his mission?
Well, that's the wild part in this, because it accrues while he's running. Basically, he's he's given the initial 1,000 people, and that's where like his sons of Zariah join him. But that's just a small group. But then he's literally just running, and I guess theoretically starts proving himself. But then when he goes to, like I said, he went to Gath, wasn't there long, went to Moab. While he was in Moab, he started going out and doing raid parties. And I guess because the Moabites and the Ammonites, they run parallel with the Israelites, and then like will battle, and then parallel and battle. So it's just like an on and off again thing. So while he's there, he does start accruing some more people. So basically, to put myself in his shoes, like you know, David's not a cold stone killer. He's a strong person. So he's going to be giving these guys a shot, basically like, side with us or, pay the price. And then same thing when he goes to Gath. When he was given Ziklag, these were nasty, nasty people. So he was going through and cleaning up. But then it says that he was stretching a line every 3 feet, and it would be basically like kill, save, or spare. I should say kill. Yeah, pretty brutal, pretty brutal. So
Very
then,
brutal.
all of these lion men and giants and Edomites and all of this are either getting out of town or being like, hey, look, it's three hots and a cot. I'm gonna roll with him. You know what I mean? So yeah, like he even at one point he tells Ittai the Gittite, which is Gittite is a giant like Goliath. Goliath is Gittite from Gath. He tells Ittai, he runs into Ittai. Ittai is the commander of 600 Gittite army. David is getting out of town and he sees Ittai and these 600 giants walking with him, and he stops. He's like, no, 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 no. You don't want this. You don't want this road. It's and they're like, we're with you. We're with you. Yes, because he like while through all this was happening, he got named king of Judah and then eventually king of Israel. From just people being like, Saul's nuts, and then his sons, that's a whole nother story. His sons came from Hebron, which is formerly known as Kirith Arba, Arba being the father of the Anak giants. So his sons try to kill him, and he's running from his sons. And a lot of the Gibberim don't like that, and then are like, "Nah, man, we're with you. We're not digging this whole thing that's going on." So yeah, dude, it's just it literally wasn't on purpose, but it's just this monumental story of like, wow, you know what I mean? Like, look what I look at my army, look what I accrued, kind of thing.
Super powerful, like extremely, extremely powerful. And for him to bring all these people together too, like all these different types of beings, is something to be said about that. Like that is either they're following you because you are a charismatic, amazing leader, or they're also following you with a little bit of fear in their hearts as well too. It's a and I'm really interested in these lion, like these lion type beings. What other what were there any other beings that you came across in your research, such as like the Saracephali, which is like the dog-headed type of beings? Was there anything like that you came across?
Oh yeah, man. So Caleb I'm sure you've heard this. Caleb's noted for the dogmen. So and the way to backtrack
I would, sorry, I'd love to say yes, I've heard of this, but I haven't. I'm like, okay, yeah, no, I don't.
yeah,
I haven't heard
dude,
this. Yeah, so
I'm horrible with spider webbing of just like throwing something out there and it's like an intense conversation. I'm horrible about that. But so the way it goes is Moses was over the promised land conquest. The 12 spies went out and saw all the giants. 10 of them said they couldn't do it. 2 of them said they could, Joshua and Caleb. And they came from intermarriage. Caleb, his name means dog or unsophisticated servant. So yes,
okay,
so he's noted as being the dogman, if you will, and coming from that form. And there's also a story with Gideon when he gets ready to go to battle. God tells him bring all his men to the water. See who laps it up like a dog, and see who uses their hand. And then so again, dude, once this was in our blood, it was all bets are off. You know what I mean? So Caleb, his brother is Kenaz, and Kenaz comes from the Kenizzites, which is one of the promised land bad guys, because that's how the way it went was. These are the tribes in the land that I'm giving you. They need to go. Kenizzite translated is hunter of men, being like Jesus is a fisher of men, meaning like a doing a thing where they were hunters of men, basically like you know uh snipers, mercenaries, whatever the case. in some crazy. And then Kenaz's son is Othniel. Othniel means violent lion of God. And Othniel was the first judge of Israel. And the way that went down backs all of this up too. So Judges is a book. It's a beautiful book, and I love, man, the more and more I do this, the more respect I have for the book of Judges, because governments and kings, that was not supposed to happen. It was not, or God would have done it. God wanted us to, every man does what's right in his own eyes, meaning, you know, it's free will. You know what happens if you mess up. So he appointed judges to take care of his people. That's good. I could, that's a life I could live. So, right? So while, um, you know, Israel's up and down, doing good, doing bad, doing good, doing bad. While they're bad, they're under an 8-year rule by a violent king. And I'm convinced all non Israelite kings were Nephilim, plain and simple. Um, so Israelites are like, hey, please help us, please help us, please help us. So it says God gave them Othniel. Othniel was already there, he was already around, he already existed. And it says that God God's spirit came upon Othniel, and he himself killed that king and subdued and got everybody back to where they needed to be. So basically, this, violent lion of God, this non-human, whatever that looks like, was usable. And that's the thing with like Samson too. Samson wasn't strong all the time.
It's
How
why'd you just bring up Samson? I Prior to this interview, I was thinking about Samson, and I was like, I should ask Adam about Samson one of these times. So yeah.
Yes, dude, I'm gonna say it. I've been working on something like super low key with Samson. Um, I like the anti-hero Iron Man thing. You know how Iron Man in the comic books, he's a drunk and he messes up all the time. I'm working on something with Samson like that, and not a power story, a retrospective, like, because Samson just, his thing was women. He was a Nazarite, which is, basically like straight edge, no drinking, no drugs, no craziness. But he liked the women, and he kept messing up. But whenever things would happen, the spirit would come upon him. So it was like he would be used. So yeah, so Samson, yeah. Samson, that's a wild story too, dude. But yeah, so Othniel was this guy, this a usable person, and he's in the family line, like, because he comes from, where I talked about Caleb and blah. So this spirit came upon him, and he just decimated. So that's more like lion, and in Dogmen, which too goes super deep because the tribe of Judah is known as the lion tribe, and then Jesus is the lion of the tribe of Judah. There's so much symbolism there. Even in Revelation, when you see Jesus, he has the head of a lamb. So it's like we have no idea what this world used to look like, homie.
We don't. Great point. We have no idea, and we're trying to decipher this book and go forward from there. Which I have some more questions about it. Actually, do is there a possibility that any of these warriors, like or David, had access to possibly like lost knowledge or spiritual power or any type of like weapons of sorts that we don't know?
Yes. So complex answer because it's Adam.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So Othniel's brother is Sarai, and he is known for the tribe of craftsmen in the Valley of Craftsmen. And then oh man, the first one just lost me. Uh hit me with the question again.
Oh, like any type of like spiritual power or like
Yes.
weaponry. Yeah.
Yes, yes. It just I feel like a dummy. It just went through my head. So when they were going through the promised land, of all the lands that needed to be conquered, one of them was Kirith, that which is Kirith meaning the land of, basically, and is the land of scribes, the lands of writings. Sepher, Sepher, is Jewish mysticism and magic that like is still straight around right now. So basically,
That's
one
something we could get
specifically,
into. Yeah.
yes, one of these lands that they conquered was like land of magicians or whatever, sorcery. So basically, like, and then of course there was a lot of intermarriage. So when they got in there, of course, yeah, like if it existed then, and you can look it up now, it absolutely stayed and it survived and it got passed through. So yeah, dude, there's so much evidence of of them getting this extra knowledge and then applying it in all these different facets.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we do know that there was Nephilim blood within the Mighty Men. Like that's a given. Were any of them perhaps redeemed? Were any of them saved? Or, we had this discussion about, like once the Nephilim were killed, their disembodied spirits roamed, another dimension, another alternate reality of sorts, for all eternity. Were any of these possibly Nephilim? Were they saved? And it could have been. I don't know. I don't know. I'll let you answer that.
Yes, man, and that's what's so like black and white about this thing is it's not super spiritual, like I guess it's being portrayed. It's just black and white. These are human and genealogy. So Obed Edom is a Gittite. Goliath is a Gittite. Now, in David's story, initially, I believe it's when he's the king of Judah, he has the ark, and this is a super famous story. They're transporting the ark, and the cart tips, and the guy on the cart reaches over to grab it, and he dies because he's not a Levit. He doesn't come from the Levitical line, and that's the ark. You got to respect that. So they leave the ark with Obed Edom, the Gittite. Now, it doesn't say that he touches it. It says that they leave it with him. So, right off the bat, he is a Gittite giant, just like Goliath, but he is actually David and Saul the seer. I'm sorry, I always do that. Samuel the seer. They appointed specific people for the Shoarim, which is the gatekeepers of the temple. So, and then some of the Korites too. I forgot to mention that some of the Korites were Shoarim too. So you basically appoint big gentlemen as gatekeepers of the temple, as bodyguards of the temple, right? And that was my point. Was it doesn't say that Obed Edom touched the ark; it was safe with them because he's a giant, but he's redeemed. He's part of the temple. He's actually again genealogically in the temple as the Shoarim. So then later on, when David he gets super cocky about all his battles, he takes a census. And Joab, one of the sons of Zeruiah, is like, "Don't do it. Don't you know you've got everybody's allegiance. Don't do it." And David's like, "I want to know how big my army is. Count it." So then there's a Nathan the prophet comes to him and was like, messed up. You get to pick one of three plagues. You get to pick one of three, but you messed up. And he picks a plague, and it stops at the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Jebusites
So
are
sorry. So he picked a plague. Like it was a. So you had to actually pick a plague. What was the plague?
it was basically like it was he could pick one of three. It was like everybody died, he died, or like a sickness comes across the land, everybody. So you know what I mean? It was like you can do this or this. Pick choose your poison. Which is it's just too wild. It speaks to God and David, because God's just kind of like, told you don't do that. You gotta, gotta pop you on the hand a little bit. But so it stopped at the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And Jebusites are one of the main bad guys from the Promised Land. And Jebusite means of the down tramplers, of the trodden underfoot, which is crazy too. Just to throw a spider web, when you read Ham and it says all of the bad people that came from Ham, you can't just go by what the name is. You got to research what it is, because that's Moses and God telling us what they are. It's not like, oh, the Jebusites. It was the down tramplers. It wasn't, oh, the Hittites. It was the terrible ones, the ones that cause you to tremble. So Ornan the Jebusite clearly was another redempted giant, basically, and because when it stopped at the threshing floor, David offered to buy it. And Ornan argued and was like, no, 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 no. It's my honor. I'm going to give it to you. And he argued and said, no, I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to buy it. So that means he respected that giant. So yeah, like it's so more black and white that, like, except for the Moabites and the Ammonites, because Deuteronomy 23 says that the Moabites and the Ammonites are not allowed in the temple even after the 10th generation, which what that means is two things. Is A, there's no blemishes, there's no dysfunctions, nothing broken in the holy of the holy in the temples, because that's God's place. And I'm sure you've heard of the red heifer thing and all that.
I'm actually going to be having an interview with someone going deep into the red heifer here coming up. I also watched there's a movie I recommend to watch called Branded, and there's a red heifer ritual that goes on in there, and it's interesting to say the least.
Dude, it's big, but it's after so the other thing it says is that some bloodlines can be birthed out, but these specifically cannot. You know what I mean? So basically, anybody other than Moabites or Ammonites, they have a shot. Black and white. Now, the demon thing, and that's not necessarily my lane. My lane is like this craziness and the giants and all that stuff. But I will say, because you've heard of the cutting the heads off of the giants and all that. Well, you notice that they cut off John the Baptist's head.
Correct.
You ready for this one?
I am. I'm like, okay, where are you going with this one? This is a twist.
Yes. So, Jesus says it specifically. Are you able to accept that Elijah is John the Baptist? So, Elijah, the prophet, is taken up into a whirlwind. God takes Elijah into a whirlwind. Now, Elijah is known as a wild man, hairy guy, just a wilderness dude. So then here comes John the Baptist. John the Baptist is a wilderness guy. He eats locusts and honey. His clothes are garment of camel hair with a leather belt around his waist. And then Jesus says that if you in the Orthodox Jewish version find and I have it in one of my blogs, the description of Elijah, it's not hairy man. He's wearing a garment of camel hair with a leather belt around his waist. So Elijah wears this wild outfit that, like, who's going to pick off the shelf? John Baptist is wearing the same thing. Jesus says what he says, and then they cut off John the Baptist's head. I feel like all that's related, because the story of cutting the head off, he's in prison, like he's no threat to nothing.
Yes,
And then,
exactly.
right, and then the king is like, oh, talking to his daughter, like, I think daughter or wife, forgive me, and asked her, like, well, you can have anything. What do you want? I want John Baptist's head on a plate. It's like, what my research has shown me, if you read it and it makes you sit back, something behind it. You need to research it.
Definitely.
So that goes back to that whole like chopping the head off, bloodline. So think of it like this: if Nephilim is the sons of God and what they did in the bloodlines, God made the sons of God, right? He made the
True. Yep.
angels. So their powers are only capped angelic powers. Like he gave them, you can do this and this cap. So technically is like, and that goes back to like Jesus with angelic conception, and John the Baptist was angelic conception. That's something that exists, and it's like the intent. What's the intent behind it? God used it for, the better good of humanity. But then the third of the rebellious use that one thing that's possible for something super bad. And then like we said with this whole entire show, these are real-time effects in the Bible. Like we had fun talking about the mighty men, but these are real-time effects of the Nephilim right there in the Bible, right there, for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Wow. That's interesting. And so okay, so cutting the heads off. I just want to go back to that. I know we're getting closer to the end, but cutting the heads off, that was to like to terminate, to kill them, to remove them. That was it. Was there something more significant with cutting the heads off? Is there something to do with like I don't know. I'm just going with that one because you know we seem like in our past, not just that, but I'm talking about like the guillotine. We're talking about the French Revolution, where we're talking Europe, like cutting the heads off. Like there's other ways to kill people, but cutting the heads off is something huge that seems to be follow humanity for quite a while, and it's horrific. And but is there something more to it? Do you think?
I do, absolutely do. There's nothing in the Bible like specifically, because it's non-canonical that says, that's how you do the, all that stuff. But that's why I bring that up, because theoretically, non-canonical, unless, it's just made up, which I think the Barnabas one is like, noted to be made up. Theoretically, if Enoch is real and Jubilees is real and, Dead Sea Scrolls and all that stuff, I'm not saying whether it is or not, but theoretically, if it is, they were there with all the stuff that we're reading. All the stuff had something to do with it. And I do believe that there are small little pieces that can be used to show certain books would have been getting knowledge from the Bible. I believe we talked on the first show about the Oaks of Mamre and then Oak of More, which is Amorite giants manipulating trees. Something else too. One of my David's mighty men comes from Gilead, one of the leftover lands from the Promised Land. Gilead, twice in the Bible, is mentioned as a special balsam from Gilead. But then once it gets translated into, mumbo jumbo, it says special medicine from Gilead. So it's like, what was this special balsam? So I feel like that's a lot of like stuff you can pull from Enoch. So yeah, absolutely, man. They call in for the John the Baptist head with everything that came with that. I do believe that that did come from somewhere. Goliath had his head cut off too. So yeah.
There's something powerful with that. And speaking of powerful, Adam, this episode was that it was very powerful and full of information as well. We got to go into these mighty men, and they truly were mighty. But I wouldn't dub them men. I would dub them beings, because a lot of them were beings. Giants. We have lion men as well. It's fascinating, is extremely fascinating, and I can see why you're so into this, and it's like I got to learn more, I got to know more. And so before we cut this episode and come to an end here, Adam, why don't you give a shout out once more to where everybody can find your work, your graphic novel, and possibly your upcoming graphic novel as well.
Yep, absolutely. Fivestones.bigcartel.com. Was my first book. Working on the second book now, Great Fish. Hopefully later this year it'll be out. Been diving super deep into my YouTube videos and doing some AI like we talked about. Adam Farris on the YouTube. just really trying to get this knowledge out there, man, and try to show everybody the history of the Bible and our history is definitely not what we're being taught at all.
It is not. There's so much more out there, and I feel that people are starting to lose control of what they told us the narrative is. I feel it's kind of crumbling apart. The more information that keeps coming out, and they keep trying to hold fast on these stories that they've told us, and they're not true. There's so much more, and but it's like they doubled down on it, though. It's like, no, this is the way things are. But it gets so ridiculous that they're trying to convince us that this is legit when it isn't. It isn't anymore. Like, we need to take a step back, and I've mentioned this so many times. We need to take a step back, realize maybe we're down, mainstream. When I say mainstream is in a dead end. They have to take a step back, take all this information in and start to be like, yeah, okay, we don't know. And it is probably one of those most bravest things to say is we don't know. And at that point, we can start figuring out the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree, dude. I agree. It's insane that we have pyramids and Baalbek and all of these archaeologically like proven evidence of giants. We cannot manipulate or replicate any of that. And we have a book that literally tells us that giants were just crawling all over this world. But you can't connect the two because once you do, then you're starting to acknowledge, and then that's where the Nephilim, they don't, this is spiritual warfare. They're trying to hide this knowledge from us. And then we did talk about it on the last show. Anything crazy comes up, it's going to be tall. We're gonna that's going to be the tell. Something visits us, or all of a sudden, it's going to be tall. It's going to be the tell sign. Yeah.
I agree, Adam. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciated it.
Oh man, thanks for having me. This was fun.
It always is. All right, everyone. That was Adam Farris again, and I want to say thank you. There we have it. It's another veil lifted, another layer of biblical history just like peeled back, from Goliath to the mighty men, from giants to possible hybrid warriors. Adam has once again reminded us that the Bible just isn't spiritual text. It's a vault of ancient mysteries waiting to be cracked open. Now, if this conversation has stirred something within you or raised more questions than answers, you're truly, guys, you're not alone. That's exactly where these best journeys begin. I want to make sure everybody check out Adam's ongoing work, his graphic novel, Five Stones, and keep your eyes peeled for his newest one, Great Fish, his deep dive into the story of Jonah. All his links, of course, will be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed today's deep dive into the strange, don't forget to hit that follow, maybe sacrifice a digital goat to the algorithm gods. Whatever helps you come back next time when we will plunge headfirst into another forgotten Codex of Curiosities. And until then, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is the light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies. Aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codex flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the Earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come and always find your way back home.